Hello, everyone, and welcome to our 2025 preview and our January horoscopes.
Oh my gosh, there is so much to cover. We are entering a brand new astrological era. I I just don't even know where to start.
I know we have a lot on deck here, so I guess let's just dive right in, right? So I feel like December of 2024 was Stephanie and I's most boldest month of our predictions. We just like put it all out there. And if you know anything about astrology, that comes from a very vulnerable place where we test our predictive abilities. And there were a couple that we got right. So, do you want to start with that first? Like,
Yeah,
or do you
yeah.
want to cover December 4th and the cacophony of fuckery that happened on that day?
Yeah, I think the first week of December was like 75 years long and
Yes.
so much happened. And not by coincidence, on December 6th, Mars went retrograde.
Hmm.
And December 4th, leading up to it, we had so much going on and so many major news events.
And when we have multiple activations on one day, which we said, like, look out for December 4th in our December forecast, that is when you know something collectively will happen. Multiple stories happen. So the first one was the sun in Sagittarius was square Saturn in Pisces. Mercury retrograde in Sagittarius was opposing Jupiter in Gemini at 16 degrees. Both were retrograde. Venus in Capricorn, which was the sweeter one, sextiled Neptune retrograde in Pisces. And this was also right after the new moon in Sagittarius that happened on December 1st. So, just a couple of the news stories, and Stephanie, feel free to like jump in. On December 4th, exactly, the South Korean president declared martial law, which is so Martian, you
Hmm.
know. And by the way, martial law happened the last time in South Korea in the late 1980s. And that was the Gwangju uprising, and it was very violent for the people protesting. And so the history of martial law in South Korea is not a good one. It's one that the people now that we're protesting remember very fondly because it only happened in the late 1980s. And so
Wow.
6 hours later, the president rescinded the martial law and apologized, but then he was impeached. And I should have looked up the transit when he was impeached, but I think it was when Mercury went direct, like 2 weeks later, he was impeached.
Wow.
Yeah, that was a big one.
That was wild.
It was
And the
wild to watch.
astrology archetypes playing out were just so literal.
Yeah. And what I found interesting too is that a lot of the protesters fought back against the military because the men in Korea have to do a mandatory 2 year military service. So that's also very Martian. And when you
Mm.
saw some of the videos of the men like doing these military movements on the actual men who had machine guns, it was very Martian to me. It's
Hmm.
like, oh, okay. Another thing that happened was there were protests in Georgia because the citizens of Georgia wanted to become part of the EU, the European Union, and not be occupied by Russia. There was the collapse of the Assad regime in Syria, which essentially freed a lot of the Syrians there under a really violent dictatorship. Do you want to do the next one?
Then we had the assassination of the United Healthcare CEO and the fascination with Luigi Mangione. And Laura notes he has a sun in Taurus, but also a Mars in Taurus. And when the sun and Mars are close to one another, but not exact, it creates something called a combustion, which can really kind of rev up that Martian energy in someone. Mars is already struggling a little bit typically when it moves through Taurus. So just very archetypally, you can see how that kind of the astrology plays out. And yeah, how that alleged murder um, was very reminiscent of the guillotine in the French Revolution and Pluto in Aquarius. And the public's overall reaction, we had this sort of awakening of like class consciousness almost of like, wait a second. Oh, the CEO died?
Mm-hmm.
Whatever. Like
Mm-hmm.
my sister died because she couldn't get
Mm-hmm.
diabetes medicine when she needed it. Or,
Yeah.
like the healthcare system is systemically harming and murdering our own citizens on a regular basis.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, there was this element of class consciousness that I think we haven't seen in a really, really long time.
Yeah. And so in your prediction, you predicted that there would be a murder of a mercurial figure in and around the full moon in Gemini with Mercury stationing direct. And when we were texting each other, you were like, oh, I got it wrong. But then I was like, no, you got it right because Mercury rules healthcare. Because Mercury's symbol is the caduceus, which is the like symbol of health, right?
And health insurance, when you think about it, is all paperwork. Mercury represents paperwork. So we had talked about, I thought there would be like a death of a mercurial figure around that Jupiter Saturn square and
Mm-hmm.
taking place around December 24th. But that Jupiter Saturn square was very much active on December 4th because Mercury and the sun were coming through and activating those points in the sky. And we know that when the planets that are closer to Earth kind of trigger and meet with planets that are further away, it brings that energy to us in a more potent way. So we really saw those themes come through on December 4th. And unfortunately, we saw them coming to light around December 24th through the 28th. That energy was still active because the moon was also acting as a trigger. The moon was moving through Sagittarius. And the IOF targeted and murdered a vehicle of journalists sleeping in a press vehicle. Kamal Adwan Hospital and the doctor and director Hussam Abu Safia. Um, that was the last functioning hospital in northern Gaza, Palestine, and the IOF destroyed it. And people were burned alive. Medical workers were burned alive. Um, People were forced to strip and leave the hospital, just walking, into destruction. And the director of the hospital was detained.
Mm-hmm.
So that's all very mercurial
Yes.
themes. And I think also one of the most gut-wrenching things that I've seen that also relates to these themes is we've had 6 babies freeze to death in Palestine in a week.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, Mercury represents youth, and it's just really horrifying.
Oh, it's so horrifying. And I predicted that a political figure would be unalived or die closer to that Jupiter Saturn square, but it ended up being Jimmy Carter, who just, I think he just passed away from being 100
Yeah. Yeah,
from
yeah, yeah.
natural causes. So it's interesting to like see these patterns in, I mean, that's what astrology is. It's observing the celestial bodies and the correlation to earthly events, and then actually seeing some of these actually manifest. It's like, oh my gosh,
Yes.
we're really honoring the tradition of our astrology roots.
Absolutely.
Um,
And let's not forget the aliens. Laura
oh my
predicted
gosh.
aliens. We
Oh
had a
my
whole
gosh, it's
situation
so
about
funny.
aliens last month, and lo and behold, that Sun Neptune square delivered.
It's so funny because I've seen UFOs or UAPs ever since I was a little girl up here in the Hudson Valley, New York and New Jersey, because we're like in a hot spot. And there were two things going on. There were drones, which everyone's like, what are those drones? And then there were actual like orbs,
Hmm.
like these circular light crafts. And the circular light crafts is what I've seen from the past. And I think the drones were the things that were observing the crafts. But regardless, people were like, what is this? What's going on? It was very Sun Square Neptune, like so much confusion, so much fear. People were freaking out.
Yeah. December just felt like everything and anything that could have happened happened. Or it was very much like the movie Everything Everywhere All at
We're all
Once.
at once.
Yeah.
I know. And just the last like prediction that I guess we kind of got right was I just mentioned that Neptune going direct, we would see further unraveling of the music industry and Jay-Z like around December 7th when the Neptune retrograde ended, Jay-Z was I guess somebody came out implicating Jay-Z in some sexual misconduct and what him and Diddy used to do back in the 90s
With a 13-year-old.
with a 13-year-old. Ew.
Yeah.
And so I guess we'll see since Neptune is going to go through a lot in 2025, what this story will unfold further with the music industry, but more specifically Jay-Z and Diddy.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's all I really had for December transits and like the news stories. I took a social media break because my mind was overwhelmed with all of the information. I mean, that's indicative of a Jupiter in Gemini. So if you have specific transits that you noticed and news stories that went along with it, please let us know. But do you have anything else, Stephanie?
No, I think we should dive into January. We are going to give like the high level main events and transits for January. And then we're also going to cover month by month the rest of 2025. So we've got a ton to get into.
Okay, so let's do it.
Mm.
So right away on January 3rd, oof, Mars retrograde in Leo will oppose Pluto in Aquarius at 1 degree. And this is the second square. The first square happened on November 3rd of 2024. This was right before the election, if you remember. And Mars in Cancer was opposing Pluto in Capricorn at 29 degrees. So woof.
Yeah.
It's kind of a rough one to start the year.
It's definitely a rough way to start the year. Mars and Pluto are two of the most intense planets in the sky. It can bring up power struggles. It can bring up
War.
war, violence, rage,
Mhm.
a need to sever, to set boundaries, to confront the taboo. It can be incredibly cathartic and healing, but of course, there may be some pain involved in
Mhm.
that. Um, it is a powerful time to reclaim your power and to set boundaries. But like I said, that isn't for the faint of heart. You know, it's difficult. I think this is going to bring us back to themes and topics that started to unravel around November 3rd, the last opposition. But this is happening in a different section of our chart and in two different signs now. So there's kind of a new layer or element that's being kind of folded into this opposition
Mhm.
as well. And then we'll have the third and final square once the Mars retrograde ends, not until April 26th of 2025. And that will still be Mars in Leo opposite Pluto in Aquarius at 3 degrees. So
Mhm.
very similar. Whatever you're going through right now is definitely going to be kind of like uh, louder during the third square.
Yeah.
But it'll
And
also feel like a final chapter.
yeah, in April, it's so far away. But to your point, I think before you have the courage to stand up for yourself and reclaim your power, there is a trigger, right? Like Mars
Mhm.
usually triggers us in some way and it dredges up possibly some stuff from our childhood, Mars and Cancer. And Mars in Leo is all about bravery and courageousness. If you think of like the Cowardly Lion and the Wizard of Oz, it's very much following your heart. And but first, you're gonna feel some touchy, touchy like trigger points that you're going to, yeah, you're gonna be triggered. And depending on if you have placements in the fixed sign placements, 0 to like 3 degrees, it might even impact you more. Mars is opposing my moon, and I was getting so angry and triggered. So, yeah, I would just pay attention and also ask yourself, like, is this the point where I need to finally stand up for like the inner child in me, the person that I needed as a child?
Yeah, absolutely. And Pluto has to do with all of our fears and our insecurities and like our worst case scenarios and our survival instincts that live in our body and our physical memory, but we kind of repress. So it definitely is just a sensitive time. People will be more reactive, yourself included, and just be as gentle as you can with yourself. Drink a lot of water, take your time before responding, all of that kind of stuff.
Yes. And speaking of Mars, on January 6th, Mars re enters Cancer.
So this is going to bring us back to the moments of frustration and inconveniences and power dynamics that were kind of unfolding between September 4th through November 3rd, but specifically October 4th through November 3rd, because the Mars pre-retrograde shadow period started on October 4th. So if you can really think about what was the most annoying thing going on in your life during that time, for me, it was the bed bugs.
Oh my God.
Um, this is kind of like a chance to revise, reflect, to change, to pivot in some way. You're being brought back to this terrain for some reason and to change something.
Mhm.
Um, Mars in Cancer is also a time where we are more prone to reacting based on our emotions in the moment because Cancer is ruled by the moon. And we may be called to defend our sense of comfort, our sense of safety, security, and kind of cling on to what's familiar, even if it's no longer good for us.
Mhm. And January 6th is just like a day of infamy in the United States. So I think
Hmm.
it's interesting that Mars re enters Cancer on this date. And also, Mars stationed retrograde at 6 Leo, which is the north node of the US Sibley chart is 6 Leo. So
Oh.
I find that's like very interesting how all of this is connected to also the election because this Mars story is tied to that story as well. And I'm wondering what will happen come January when we have an inauguration.
Well, it's interesting because all of 2025, there are so many major transits that fold
Mhm.
into the US Sibley
Mhm.
chart, which don't
Yes,
worry, we're going to unpack.
we're going to unpack. Yes. On January 11th, the nodes will change from Aries and Libra to Pisces and Virgo. So the north node will move into Pisces and the south node will move into Virgo. This is a
And
big change.
this is a big, big deal for everybody. This means that you're experiencing new fated and destined events in different sections of your birth chart. And the last time we had the North Node in Pisces and the South Node in Virgo was from March 2006 through February of 2008. We had the South Node in Pisces and the North Node in Virgo in September of 2016 through August of 2017. And similar themes and topics from that time will come up again. But really, if you can think back to that 2006 through 2008,
Mhm.
those are that's the focus. And you'll be experiencing fated changes, new beginnings, endings, and interactions in the Pisces and Virgo section of your birth chart.
Mhm. And I think it's even more significant, or maybe not more, but the fact that Saturn and Neptune are in Pisces still. So there's the Pisces section of your chart that's coming to a close and also beginning something new.
It's like a grand finale.
Yes. On January 13th, we will have a full moon in Cancer at 23 degrees and 59 minutes.
Oof. This one, this one's just a doozy. Okay, but let's say this. The good thing about this full moon is it marks the halfway point of the Mars retrograde. So if you are just feeling fed up with this Mars retrograde, like many of us are, January 13th, you get there and you've made it halfway. And it's a full moon. So there could be an important moment of illumination, of clarity, of moving forward in a new way. What makes this full moon a little sticky is that the moon is conjunct Mars retrograde, like almost to the degree. It's a
Mhm.
very, very tight conjunction. So it really is exacerbating that Mars retrograde in Cancer energy, the story that you're personally dealing with. And I think that this will coincide with some very heartbreaking headlines in the world.
Mhm. Maybe dealing with children, because every time like Mars is in Cancer, something happens to children. And I hate saying that because I don't want to like manifest something or put words out there, but it is like the reality of this transit. This happens at 5:26 p.m. Eastern time, 2:26 p.m. Pacific time, and it's in the third decan of Cancer, which is the Four of Cups. So it is the Four of Cups. When I look at the picture, it just looks like you're missing out on something, or like you're just like disappointed that something didn't happen. And I feel like that's the general vibe of this full moon chart, unfortunately.
Yeah, I feel like there's for me it evokes like two separate feelings. It's either like yeah, like apathy,
Mhm.
disappointment, or it's like a pause. It's like whoa,
Mhm.
whoa, whoa. I'm overwhelmed with my options.
Mhm.
I gotta slow down.
Yeah,
And so, maybe there's an element of both of those things of like you're sad
that's
something didn't
true.
happen and you've got to figure out, well, what's your plan moving forward? How are you going to change and pivot things?
Mhm. Look at you being so optimistic. But yeah, that's true because it is the halfway point of the Mars retrograde story. So this could be a pivot point. The full moon is applying to a trine to Neptune in Pisces. So there is a dreamy quality to it as well. And it's sextile to Uranus and Taurus, which is supportive, but it is in a separating square to Chiron in Aries, which we're recording this on December 30th, and now Chiron is direct.
Yes. So, yeah, because the moon is highlighting that, some of your Chiron story might fold into it as well.
Mhm. I personally experience moon in cancers to just be very emotional.
Oh, I'm always crying or I'm crying
Always
in the bath
crying,
or
always
yeah.
crying. I always feel a little melancholy. And I just like need, but I need to do that. Like
Mhm.
that's my monthly like cancer purge. Like I just need to cry.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
that's what this day is going to be for me.
And when the moon connects with Neptune, it actually helps you cry. Like it can help
That's
you
true.
feel into your
That's true.
emotions, especially the ones that have been like blocked.
That's true. So there's both sweetness and a little bit of like, okay, we need to pivot because something has not gone our way
Hmm.
or whatever you perceive that to be. So on January 20th, the sun will ingress into Aquarius, and this will be Aquarius season. Aquarius is a fixed air sign. The very next day, on January 21st, the sun in Aquarius will conjunct Pluto in Aquarius at 1 degree.
And this is for the first time in our lifetime. So
Yes.
last year, the Sun Pluto conjunction was at 29 degrees Capricorn. So we've never had this conjunction in the sign of Aquarius, while any of us have been alive, at least. It was
Mm-hmm.
248 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And let's also note the presidential inauguration.
Yes.
So that's in this aspect is baked into the inauguration chart.
Mm-hmm. So definitely themes. So the sun represents like the leader and Pluto represents power. So this is a new, it's like basically a new moon. So like a new era of leadership in our country.
Hmm. And
Woof.
I think also
Can't help it.
shining a light on the darkest parts of our country and the corruption and the leaders in power because Pluto kind of represents all of that and the sun is like shining a light on it.
Yes,
So,
exactly.
yeah, and that's going to mark a brand new cycle for us.
Hmm. On the positive note, though, when Pluto was in Aquarius was when it was the American Revolution and when, the American settlers or colonists, they broke free of the British monarchy. So just putting our intentions out there that this is transforming what leadership looks like in this country.
Yes. And just a side note, something I've been thinking about, and I like want to make a TikTok, but I've been so depressed and uninspired about this. But I just want to say for anyone who is like a manifestation person, a
Mm-hmm.
co-creation cutie, if you use visualization, you can visualize the world we want to live in. You
Oh, for
can
sure.
pray
Mm-hmm.
every night for a
Yeah.
better world. You can
Yes.
pray for the softening of hearts of
Mm-hmm.
bad people. And I just want to encourage you to do that on a daily
Mm-hmm.
basis. And, you know, that energy exists in the universe and it comes together and it's how we
Mm-hmm.
co-create. Nothing is written in stone. We have free will. And so, yes, there's a lot of things that are unfolding in 2025 that are a little scary, but nothing is written in stone. And we together as a people have power. So,
I love that you said that because the origins of astrology back in ancient Mesopotamia was used for prediction and was for prediction for war and also for medical uses. And so if we understand like what it's used for, then we have the power within us through magic, which is controlling energy, to shift the collective consciousness for co-creating a world we want to live in. It just so happens that it's currently being manipulated by the people in power, but there's more of us. So I also think Pluto in Aquarius is going to help us to remember that we are interconnected because
yeah.
Aquarius is all about like networks and revolution. So I like that's why we're reporting on these transits to not scare you, but to empower you and say, like, this is what happened in the past. It doesn't have to be our future.
Right. And we can tap into that energy and
Mhm.
maximize it in the way that we want to. And remember that Pluto in Aquarius is a 20-year transit
Mhm.
and it's a marathon and not a race.
Mhm.
Sprint.
So, yeah. And so by the end of this Pluto transit, we can maybe not even have a president anymore. We can
Wouldn't that
have
be
like a
cute?
governing council of elders who are
Mhm.
indigenous, like just
Love.
put it out there.
Yes. Love it.
So on January 29th, the new moon in Aquarius is at 9 degrees and 51 minutes. It also marks the Lunar New Year, which we will be entering the year of the snake.
It's my year.
Oh,
I,
yeah, because it's your Jupiter return, right?
yes, I'm a slithery
Yes.
little snake.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
I
Hello.
know. I'm
In
excited.
in Chinese astrology, they say that during snake years, a prominent leader emerges or
Ooh.
leaders emerge. So
Ooh.
yeah,
TBD.
we shall see.
Yeah. Um, this new moon, cute that it's making that trine to Jupiter. It's the first new moon in Aquarius that's co-present with Pluto.
Mm-hmm.
Um, hmm, I don't know. It's in the first decan of Aquarius, Five of Swords. The Five of Swords energy is like it's just it's like lose-lose, you know?
Okay, but the Five of Swords, this is my interpretation because I have Venus in Aquarius. It's like a warning to not keep
Mm.
looking at the past because if you base all of your stories, especially like relationally, on the past, then that's what you will manifest for the future.
Mm.
Because it's Saturnian, right? So the warning here is to heal enough so that you're not operating in your current reality with the scars of the past, with the conflicts of the past.
Ooh, I like that.
That's how I interpret that card because yeah, Five of Swords, it's like um the picture is a man holding a sword looking back at everyone else, kind of like, confused, right? Um, but fives are about change.
Yeah.
And so that is the warning there.
There could be some conflict you're leaving in the past.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. I like that. Yeah. It'll be it'll be new for all of us because we haven't had this new moon with Pluto and Aquarius. So TBD, everyone, and report back. Let us know.
Yeah. And ultimately, Aquarius is about future forward thinking.
Mhm.
Capricorn is more about the past, right? And Aquarius is about the future, and it's a new moon. So, and it's a new lunar new year, which is like what I guess like people who follow the lunar calendar see as the new year. The
Right.
Gregorian calendar is January 1st, but the new year is a time of celebration and letting go of the past.
Yep.
So
Absolutely.
that is our highlight of January. And now we're going to move into, if we're all ready, 2025 and the major transits happening of 2025. This is a general overview. And so if you want to get more granular day by day, you could follow our monthly forecast and also Stephanie's daily forecast on your podcast.
And Laura's Patreon on your podcast, you are also doing a lot of in-depth coverage of the transits. So yeah, stay tuned on our podcast if you want to know more in depth. And of course, we will continue to do the monthly in-depth forecast moving forward.
Yes. So January, two major things happen, which we've already touched on, so we won't like dwell on it. On January 11th, the nodes change to the North Node in Pisces and the South Node in Virgo. And then January 6th, Mars retrograde enters Cancer.
Yep.
Perfect.
Hmm.
February 4th, Jupiter stations direct at 11 Gemini.
I am really looking forward to this because I feel like Jupiter retrograde in Gemini has just been a bag of poop because it feels like
Yeah.
you know, Jupiter is the greater benefic in astrology. It
Yes.
already struggles when it's in Gemini, and then on top of it, it's retrograde. And I just feel like since it went retrograde, I don't know if anyone else is noticing this, but for me, it's been so noticeable. Like it is so difficult to, Jupiter represents our growth and our optimism and our dreams and our beliefs. And I've just been in a more depressive mood since this
Yeah.
shift. And it's going to bring us back to October 9th of 2024. That's when it went retrograde. So similar themes and topics are coming up. But I don't know. I know Jupiter is still going to struggle in Gemini. It's information
Mhm.
overload, but I'm looking forward to it to just have like a little bit more help and like optimism in the sky. This
Yeah.
last Jupiter Saturn square, because Jupiter was retrograde, I felt like it was so much harsher than the
Mhm.
one we had in August because Jupiter really wasn't there to lend any type of support. So
Yeah.
IDK, I'm looking forward to it. 11 degrees of Gemini. If you have any planets or placements around 11 degrees of the mutable signs, Besos to you. You're
No,
lucky.
just my ascendant and descendant.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's been rough. And at the last Jupiter Saturn square, we were chatting with each other because I was just like, I am fucking done. I was like, I'm done. I need to take a break because I just felt so stuck and so frustrated. And so not only is Jupiter like struggling in Gemini, but it's constantly been having these squares with Saturn, which is also unfortunately going to continue until 2025. But every time I felt like there was a growth, it would be like, no. Saturn would be like, no.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I was like, oh. And because I'm a mutable rising, Jupiter rules two of my angular houses. So it's like, I just felt very stuck. So I'm very much looking forward to it going forward personally.
Yeah. I hope it's a moment of unstuckness for us all and it brings some sort of little blessing, a
Yes.
bright spot in the chaos.
Yes. February 23rd. Mars
Drum roll.
stations direct at 17 Cancer. Finally.
Woo!
Oh my
Oh
God.
my gosh, this is the moment we've been waiting for. My goodness, the end of Mars retrograde. However, we will be contending with this energy through early May. I think we don't pass the post retrograde shadow point, the degree, 6 degrees of Leo until May 2nd.
Yeah.
So we do have quite some time of still kind of like tying up our shoes and buttoning up our shirts and just finishing the final touches of our Mars retrograde story. However, I think things are going to start to clear up around this time and you will know how you want to move forward. You might make an important decision today. You might take an important action. You may sever ties with someone around that time.
Yeah. Thank goodness. And
Hmm.
and usually Mars spends 6 weeks in a sign, but retrograde between Cancer and Leo, it will be there for 10 months.
Yeah.
Like, yikes. So the good news is, which we'll touch on later on, is whatever Mars has been breaking apart or creating havoc, Jupiter will come here to like heal and repair later on in the summer. But we'll talk about that later.
Hmm.
Anything else for February?
No, because March is batshit crazy.
Yes. So January and February are kind of like the calm before the storm and the cacophony of Aries energy that is happening in March.
Hmm.
So on March 1st, Venus will station retrograde at 10 Aries. And it's interesting because on March 15th, Mercury will station retrograde also in Aries.
At
So
9 degrees.
at
So,
9 degrees,
really
yeah.
close to the same point.
So both Venus and Mercury will be retrograding through your Aries house at the same time.
But wait, there's more. On March 29th, we have the final new moon solar eclipse in Aries, also at 9 degrees. So this
Yeah.
is like a hot spot. There
Yeah.
is a ton going on. This storyline is going to be connected through those 3 dates, um, like directly.
Mhm.
And yeah, and keep in mind, like we're still dealing with like the post Mars retrograde shadow period. So we have Venus retrograde, Mercury retrograde, a little leftover of Mars retrograde energy there. And those are all inner planets. That's like rare to have these planets that are close to Earth
Mhm.
just going backwards and slowing down and reflecting and some sort of pivot or turning point. Um, Venus retrogrades typically can bring up relationship issues or old relationship dynamics and patterns. I think it's also turning points for social justice movements.
Mhm.
And Aries is the sign of the warrior.
Yes.
So I think there's a lot to pay attention to there. I'm
Mhm.
curious to see what unfolds.
Yeah, because Venus is at home or in its domicile in Taurus and Libra. So when Venus is in a Martian sign, it wants to be independent and wants to take action, which is not where Venus likes to be. Venus wants to form bonds and like be lovey dovey. And so the Venus retrograde in Aries can be more of this like warrior goddess energy. And you might unfortunately separate with people because again like it's in a Mars ruled sign.
And kind of like how we were talking about Jupiter and Gemini being difficult while it's retrograde. Here you have that double whammy because you have Venus in Aries and then it goes retrograde. So relationship conflicts, power struggles, frustrations that you've repressed are definitely coming up to the surface.
Mm-hmm. So the North Node was in Aries and it moved January 11th. So there was something trying to manifest archetypally in your Aries house. And now March, it's like Aries. It's like you have to like you have to really embody this archetype. And Aries is the warrior, like you mentioned, it's the pioneer, it's taking action. So like whatever lesson we're meant to learn about Aries, it's like happening in March.
It is. It is. And that is going to be a little bit more exacerbated because on March 30th, Neptune goes into Aries for the first time since 1861 through 1875. And for anyone who wants to know, that was when we had the American Civil War.
Mm-hmm.
And we're also going to have on March 14th a total lunar eclipse in Virgo. And it's happening at 23 degrees of Virgo. And that's going to be important because once Venus and Mercury station direct, they're stationing direct in Pisces, so right opposite that eclipse point.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're stationing direct around 25 degrees or something like that. So very close to that eclipse point. So everything that's unfolding in March is really a foreshadow. It is weaving in your fate, your destiny, and um, we're just having some once in a lifetime transits.
Mm-hmm.
Neptune is going to be in Aries for the next 14 years, and it's a biggie.
It's big. And because Aries is a cardinal fire sign, so the outer planets are moving from like feminine yin signs of earth and water to more yang exterior facing masculine signs of fire and air. So water and earth are more like adaptable, they kind of like contain, whereas fire and air is like, okay, we got to make shit happen. So like Stephanie mentioned that the American Civil War, like most people see that as a Neptune and Aries transit because the Civil War began on April 12th, 1861. And literally the next day, Neptune entered the sign of Aries. And during that time, Uranus was in Gemini, which was the USA's Uranus return.
Mhm.
And Uranus will also enter Gemini in 2025.
Yeah,
It's a big deal.
it's
Um,
definitely a big deal.
yeah. And like what I find interesting about Neptune in the sign of Aries is that this was also because when Neptune was discovered in 1846 is also when photography started like becoming a thing. And so by the time Neptune entered Aries and it was the Civil War, this was the first time that there was war photography. And so like it was showing the reality of the horrors of war, which I find so interesting because now moving into 2025, like the whole reason why we're privy to even what's happening in Palestine was because of like Motaz and Bisan and these content creators who showed us the reality of occupation.
Yeah.
And so I'm just wondering like how that will like further unveil the truth of things happening around the world.
I am a little concerned it might blur the truth or obscure it with Neptune. And especially with all of the advancements in AI. And since we're
Mm-hmm.
having Pluto and Aquarius forming a trine with Uranus and Gemini, I just think that there could also be Neptune is a planet of fog and illusion. And there
Mm-hmm.
could be, with the advancement of AI, some deception at play in
Mm-hmm.
some way, especially when it comes to like the wars, right? The warrior Aries that are unfolding, or censorship. Maybe it's like censorship of the media, which we're already seeing.
Yes.
Legacy media does not cover what's actually unfolding on
Mm-hmm.
Earth.
Yeah,
Um,
that's a good point. And also with Uranus and Gemini, like technologically technological advances even more in warfare so that like it's not necessarily, you know, in the Civil War, it was like even advanced at that time, but now it doesn't even have to be man to man combat. It's just drones.
yeah.
And yeah, that's a good point about the Neptune and Aries. But
I think
also,
there'll be both of it. I think both of
yeah.
those will coexist. I think, Neptune is also compassion and empathy. And I think we'll be seeing a lot of images that break hearts from war,
Mm-hmm.
right? Aries.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there is also there's more to the story there. Because Neptune is just like we've said, it's such an elusive planet and energy.
Neptune also is about our ideals and our belief systems. And the whole reason why the Civil War even began was actually Abraham Lincoln, who has a Saturn Neptune conjunction. He ran on his presidency with ending slavery through the Emancipation Proclamation that came out on 1863. And the southern states wanted to keep slavery, so they ceded from the Union, which it was like kind of like, well, if you believe in slavery, then you can just leave. I don't know. That was my personal opinion. But anyway, that was the whole premise of the Civil War. And so Neptune and Aries are these like ideals around like what we are fighting for and like these moral values about humanity. And so I'm curious as to see like with Neptune entering Aries for 14 years, starting in really 2026, this is just like the glimpse of like, what are some of these ideals that we are willing to go to war for?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So stay tuned because this is just like the first act. It's the warm up.
Yes. And so just to backtrack, Venus stations retrograde in Aries. Then we have a total lunar eclipse in Virgo, which is a full moon basically. And then, which is the 14th, the 15th, Mercury stations retrograde. On March 29th, we have a solar eclipse in Aries, which is a new moon. And then the next day, Neptune will enter Aries. So that's pretty much March. It's a lot, but
It's a lot. Yeah. So March is going to be one of the main events for your 2025, personally and
Mhm.
collectively. That is going to be a time to really regulate your nervous system proactively in the best way you
Mhm.
can.
Yes. So on April 7th, Mercury will station direct at 26 Pisces. It will conjunct Saturn.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting that both the Mercury and Venus stations, so Venus will station direct in Pisces on April 12th at 24 degrees of Pisces, but also conjunct Saturn. So
Mhm.
there's something that's ending there. There's some
Mhm.
sort of commitment that needs to be made, some sort of boundary, some sort of limit,
Mhm.
constriction. Um, and, with Venus, that's in our close relationships or with our finances or contracts. And with Mercury, it's in our communication, what needs to be said. So through March and April, the Aries and Pisces sections of your chart are just continuing to fire up.
Mhm.
And these are turning points, right? When the retrogrades end. And of course, we'll have to move through the post retrograde shadow period. But at this point, you will kind of know how you want to move forward.
Yes. The Mercury and Venus retrograde will move from Aries to Pisces and then back to Aries when it goes direct. But one thing I want to say is it's sometime in like February and then again later on in April where Venus will be at its exaltation degree at 27 Pisces. And that is like so sweet. I think it's like sometime in February and then again in April, when Venus will conjunct Neptune at 27 degrees. And ultimately, I think that is really sweet. Like whatever Venus is going to go through during its retrograde, conjunct Saturn, and then conjunct the North Node, and then conjunct Neptune. Venus has so much dignity in Pisces.
Hmm.
So I think like that's one sweet spot you can look forward to during that transit.
That's sweet. That's really good. And, we'll get that, like you said, 3 times, which is really nice.
Yes.
And fun fact, the pre-retrograde shadow period for Venus retrograde specifically is going to begin on January 28th. So you can kind of start to pick up your personal
Mhm.
Venus retrograde clues and storylines around that time.
Yes. And then on April 18th, Mars will ingress back into the sign of Leo.
Yay. Uh. bringing us back to November 3rd through January 6th. And this is like our final hurrah. So we
Mhm.
just got to make it from 0 degrees Leo to 6 degrees Leo. And then we are done with the Mars retrograde saga. We will still have to travel through the rest of Leo.
Mhm.
Um, and I think it doesn't leave Leo until later May, maybe even early
Yeah.
June.
Yeah. I think it's May.
But yes, we are getting closer to the end, which is so lovely.
Hmm. Okay, May. May 4th, Pluto will station retrograde at 3 Aquarius. And then, yeah, do you want to say anything about that?
I just want to say this is the first time Pluto is staying in Aquarius, so it's never
Mhm.
going back into Capricorn. So we're getting the
That's
full retrograde in the sign of
yes,
Aquarius this time. That is all.
that's true. And on May 24th, Saturn will ingress into Aries. OMG.
And this is just as big as, well, almost as big as Neptune moving into
Yeah.
Aries. But the fact that we have all this other Aries action going on, and then Saturn, the planet of like karma, responsibility, challenge, limitation, dedication, enters Aries. Also, Saturn is in fall when it is in Aries, which means it struggles a little bit more, right? Aries wants to go, go, go and like do it now. And Saturn is like, whoa, I'm the Lord of time. Let's slow down. Let's come up with
Yeah.
a plan. So
Slow your
those
roll.
energies are
Yeah.
kind of conflicting. So, um, this is a biggie.
It's a biggie. And I just wanted to give a little bit of an example. So whoever is, well, first, whoever is born between 1996 and 99-ish, you will go through your Saturn return, your first one.
Welcome.
Um, yeah, welcome to the Saturnian Club. George Washington has Saturn in Aries. Okay,
Oh,
and he was the commander in chief of the American Revolution War against the British. And so, actually, because he became the first president of the US, that's where the term commander in chief came from. Um, and I loved reading his biography because it was like he was a farmer. He just like wanted to live on his farm and like enjoy his life. But then once the American Revolution started, they were like, "Come on, George, you gotta serve our country, or like become independent from the British." So I thought that was so Saturn in Aries being like the first president of the United States, and like also because he was a military general, right? Like Saturn in Aries.
Saturn is also where you excel over time and
Mhm.
where you gain experience and maturity and you can rise in the ranks. And so, like you said, he's a military Aries and he was kind of elevated in that position. That's fascinating.
Yes. And just the last example, Lyndon B. Johnson was going through his second Saturn return in Aries in 1968. And he was very unpopular because of his policy on the Vietnam War. Get it? War, Aries. And
Mm.
he had to step down from the presidential race that year, kind of like what happened this year with Biden. And his VP, I believe it's Humphrey, he lost to Richard Nixon. So this is where like Saturn finds its fall, right? Because when you are not um Saturn in Aries is its fall. So when he was not listening to the people regarding the Vietnam War because it was wildly unpopular, that's when he had to step down because he wasn't gonna get the ticket for the Democratic Party. But ultimately his party lost. And it's like really like history, like you have to learn history because it just repeated itself again in 2024.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's nutty.
It's nutty, it's wild. So yeah, Saturn in Aries. Again, Aries is another signification of war. Um, and
And because Saturn
yeah.
struggles in Aries, it could kind of get worse before it gets better.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and personally, the section of Aries in your birth chart is where you're kind of going through a cosmic upleveling and you'll be dealing with challenges and setbacks, but that ultimately are growing pains that help you refine your process
Mhm.
and reach like a better, way to manage and move forward. But it's
Yes.
through time. It's not something that you can rush. And oh Lord,
Mhm.
have I learned that with Saturn and Pisces. I am so ready for it to leave my eighth house. Ugh.
I'm like, yeah, my fifth house, huh? And it's been squaring me and it's been on my Mercury.
You know
It's
what? When Saturn was in
annoying.
my fifth house, I was like a little sexual beast.
Really?
So
Because like
maybe that's for you.
maybe, but like Saturn has a detached and cold feeling. So I was like, is it going to make me not interested in
I don't
like, we'll see, right? We shall see. Because it will, when it moves into Aries, it will conjunct my sun. So I'm like, what could this entail?
Mm,
I will report back in June. When is it? May. I
yeah,
will report
yeah.
back in May. Okay, so May, another big transitional month. A planet moving into a new sign. And then June, we have another big ingress. On June 9th, Jupiter will enter the sign of Cancer for 1 year.
Yay.
Yay.
And Jupiter is exalted in Cancer. And so
No.
we're getting like the greater benefic going from just not really thriving and barely, bringing us any opportunities and blessings. And then we really have this sweet spot of
Yes.
support and sense of security. And you're really, I think, better able to tap into your gratitude and the abundance that already exists in your life.
Mhm. I'm like, this is such a like transit for people to get pregnant and have babies because like
Yeah.
Jupiter is it expands and it wants to grow. And when it's I found exalted planets bring out the best in that planet. And so Jupiter in Cancer can grow things in its own timing and like very slowly and intentionally. And I just think this is such a fertile transit,
It's a
personally.
fertile myrtle moment. So if you don't want human babies, do something about that proactively.
Or
Yes.
it could be a time to grow a project if you're not into the baby thing.
Or you
You
could get a fur baby. But
or
yes, a
for
project for sure.
yes. But it's a
Uh,
I think this is the sweetest transit of 2025.
yes, I will say from June 9th through June 15th, Jupiter's dealing with a square from Saturn and Aries. So you kind of have that same, we get our final on June 15th, Jupiter Saturn square in a new sections of our chart, right? Because Jupiter's now in
Mm-hmm.
Cancer, Saturn's in Aries. And it's kind of like the third and final square of the chapters that we've been dealing with. But
Mm-hmm.
after the 15th, that's when Jupiter really can show up for us and
Oh
just
yeah.
deliver the blessings.
No, I'm so excited for that. Oh, yay. July 4th, which is the USA's solar return,
Uh-huh.
Neptune will station retrograde at 2 Aries.
Okay, that makes me feel like something will be concealed or they're going to be distracting us. They're going to be like, look at this UFO, and something insane is going to happen in the
Yes.
other direction.
And like 3 days later, Uranus will ingress into Gemini.
Hey,
This is huge. Another outer planet moving into another sign. It's like, ugh.
this is huge because it hasn't happened since I think 1941 was the last time Uranus was in Gemini.
Mhm.
And Uranus has been in Gemini during the American Revolution, the Civil War, and World War II.
Mhm.
The United States Sibley birth chart has Uranus in Gemini and also Mars in Gemini, Mars, the planet of war. So when Uranus comes back through Gemini, it is a time of active conflict, usually for the United States.
Yes.
That is not to fearmonger. That is just literally looking back at the three last periods of when Uranus has been in Gemini. We have been actively involved in conflicts
Mhm.
either here or
At home.
afar.
Yeah. Because it's in the USA's seventh house of open enemies, it's opposite the USA's Sag rising. So
Right.
that's that indicator is like just based on the cycle. It's just what happens.
Yes, and it will stay here until 2032. So, about 7 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um, it's not all gonna be bad. I think that is just something we have to say and get out of the way is that absolutely tension, conflict in the US will probably kick up in some way. Um, I think Uranus moving into Gemini is also going to change the way we communicate. It's probably going to bring changes in short distance travel. It's probably going to bring changes in space travel. It might make space travel easier. We might see that like space tourism
Mm-hmm.
start. Um, Changes in social media. There'll probably be a new social media platform that takes
Yes.
off. Groundbreaking, inventive ideas.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, it's
A
an
lot of
interesting.
innovations. Yeah.
Mhm.
Uranus is the planet of awakening and revelation, and it was discovered during Pluto and Aquarius through the invention of the telescope.
Mm.
So I feel like with Uranus in Gemini, it is like an innovative time. Lots of inventions and stuff. Not that that's also like a good thing, right? What is good or bad? Because sometimes when you invent something new, it's at the harm of other people. But I think time is going to feel like it's moving really fast as well.
Yeah, I'm wondering if it's the downfall of legacy media. And if
Mm-hmm.
people have an awakening to that and a realization that, like, all of these legacy media sites
Mm-hmm.
and organizations and companies are owned by billionaires who
Yes.
have interests in lining their pockets. And
Mm-hmm.
so, you know, I was a editor of an alt weekly in Marin County, the Pacific Sun. It was the second oldest alt weekly in the country. And even just doing that on like a local level, my publisher had interest and would dictate what I could write about and what I couldn't write about. And that's just on a very localized level.
Yeah.
So when you think about these major companies like
Mm-hmm.
CNN and NBC and, Fox and all of those, like they're run by billionaires with very specific interests and people who are lobbying to them. So, IDK, but I kind of hope that
Yes.
Uranus and Gemini helps bring out the truth and
Mm-hmm.
helps us share information in novel ways amongst more like grassroots community and through social media. Like maybe we're getting more like news influencers.
Mm-hmm. And to your point that you mentioned earlier, it will be trine to Pluto and Aquarius, which is
Yes.
a very supportive aspect.
Hmm.
So I think that's going to happen too. And also, what is that app with Elon Musk? X. I
Hmm.
think that is going to change because it's a Gemini. It's a Gemini app,
Oh,
basically.
yeah. And he bought it all during Mars retrograde in
Yes.
Gemini.
Yes.
Interesting.
I feel like something's going to happen to that. But
Hmm.
um, yeah, this is a big one, Uranus and Gemini. So look out for what happens on that ingress on July 7th. But yeah, it's pretty like monumental to be living in the US at this time when all of these things are returning back to the natal positions because also the US is going through its Chiron return as well. So we shall see.
Hmm.
On July 13th, Saturn will station retrograde at 1 Aries.
Bringing you back to March 30th.
Yes. And then on July 13th, Mercury will station retrograde at 15 Leo.
Yes, and we had a Mercury retrograde in Leo last year from August 4th through the 28th. So similar themes and topics are coming up again this time around.
Mm-hmm. And then I just wrote some notes around the Neptune and Saturn conjunction because during the month of July, both Saturn and Neptune will be at the same degree at 1. The exact conjunction happens on February 20th, 2026. So they're not exact during July, but this will give you a preview as to like what your Saturn and Neptune story might be like. And the last time Saturn and Neptune were conjunct were because it happens every 35 to 37 years was 1989 to 1990. There was a triple conjunction with Uranus and Capricorn, which I think you have, right?
I do.
Yes. So this will be the square. Um, and during that time, the Berlin Wall fell and the
Mhm.
Soviet Union collapsed, reforming and restructuring Russia as a country. And in 1990, the South African apartheid ended. And then Palestine, in its 1988 chart, when Yasser Arafat was the leader of the PLO, that chart also has a Uranus, Saturn, Neptune conjunction in Capricorn. And so, what this shows is like forming and the dissolution of old structures and boundaries. And this Saturn and Neptune conjunction is very tied with Russia. So, we'll see more Russia stories and the Ukraine, the occupation in Ukraine. But what I found so interesting was that maybe this is another iteration of the Palestine story. Hopefully, inshallah, right? And the thing to understand about cycles is that energy cannot be created nor destroyed. So it's not that like these places don't exist, but something is reformed.
Yes. And it's borders, right? Saturn
Borders.
represents borders. So,
Mhm.
and Neptune is like the dissolution and the
Mhm.
breakdown. So there is some sort of change. It interesting that it's a square, so that the Saturn Neptune is squaring Palestine, Saturn Neptune. Um, we will see.
Yeah. So just as like we were saying with Pluto and Aquarius, what I do is I visualize with the Saturn and Neptune, like I visualize the apartheid walls coming down
Hmm.
and I visualize like people being able to be sovereign in their own land. And so if you can visualize it, make it real in this reality, this is like, I think, the highest timeline that we can call in for this transit.
Absolutely.
Okay, so August,
August.
August 11th, Mercury will station direct at 4 Leo.
Fabulous. I love it. Right on, right near my ascendant.
Yes.
Something juicy is happening around that time.
Yes.
I'll report back.
Yes, and you have Mars in Leo. So it was your Mars return again.
But my Mars in Leo is at 29 degrees, the aneretic degree.
Ah,
Oh,
okay. So not yet.
not
Okay.
yet.
I got it. Um, so then I just wrote a little note on August 8th and 9th. The outer planets will be in trines. They won't be exact, but Uranus at 1 degree of Gemini will sextile Saturn and Neptune in Aries for the first time. Uranus in Gemini will trine Pluto retrograde at 2 Aquarius. And then around that time, Mars will be in the sign of Libra. And there will be a
Mm.
grand air trine between Libra, Mars in Libra, Pluto in Aquarius, and Uranus in Gemini. Oh, an
That's
opposition to Aries. Yeah.
that's a big deal because Mars is acting as a trigger. So it's really connecting all those outer planets
Mm-hmm.
and it's bringing the energy down to Earth and it's traveling between them. It's like the translator of light. So, um, that is going to be interesting. It's going when outer planets meet up like that, it's more of a collective
Mm-hmm.
global event. So, August around that time is definitely going to have some major storylines to
Mm-hmm.
pay attention to.
Oh, yeah. That's why I marked those two dates down because I was like, something is happening.
Well, and it's probably the Mars in Libra is probably tracing over some of those old eclipse points.
That's true.
So, and we know that the
Mhm.
Libra eclipses specifically have been very active in Palestine and what's happening,
Yes,
the genocide.
that's very true. If you didn't know, Israel or the nation state of Israel has a Libra rising, and the first solar eclipse in Libra activated Israel's ascendant.
By
So
degree, it
this
was like 21 degrees.
literally, so this is why we're bringing that up because it's really part of that eclipse story. Yeah, that's interesting. That's something to look out for. And um, September 1st, Saturn retrograde will ingress back into Pisces. So
No.
during the fall,
Oh,
it's so wild how, like, if you look at the astrology of like December of 2025, it looks exactly like the astrology of December 2024 because all those planets move back into their signs essentially. So Saturn will go back into Pisces.
sorry. Not good at hiding my feelings.
Yeah, so it's not done. Saturn is not done um restructuring your Pisces house. I mean, I'm not excited either. Jesus. I'm like, get out of my fourth house.
I
Um
know. I mean, who knows? Saturn and Aries could be just so hellacious that I like want Saturn and Pisces
oh,
back,
right.
but
You're like,
ugh, I really just want it to be over. But yeah, okay. So, okay, but I will say usually Saturn delivers like a final blessing,
that's true.
right?
Yes.
So like when it takes its final dip in a section of your chart, it's like a
Mhm.
final karmic lesson and a blessing.
Yes, you get a little treat at the end of its transit.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And then on September 6th, Uranus will station retrograde at 1 Gemini. So this is the first retrograde of that transit.
Okay, that's a biggie. That'll bring you back to, I believe it's July 7th.
Mm-hmm. And then on September 7th, we will have a total lunar eclipse at 15 Pisces. And this is a full moon.
Mm.
The
Bringing you
chart.
back to September 17th of last year,
Mm-hmm.
which is when we had the last eclipse in
Eclipse in
Pisces.
Pisces. And the ruler, lovely, will be Jupiter in Cancer, but it will square Mars and Libra.
Yeah.
That's an active lunar eclipse, I have to say.
Yeah, I think that feels unfortunately pretty like violent.
Mm-hmm.
Jupiter is an expander, an amplifier. Mars and Libra can struggle and really kick up tension and conflict
Mm-hmm.
on a global scale, at least. But I will say Jupiter is in the overcoming position,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that
And it's more
means that,
dignified.
and it's dignified. So that is kind of a mitigation here. And there could be some sort of, that is a mitigation to consider. So it might not be as bad as I just made it sound.
Yeah. But lunar eclipses being a full moon, it is an ending to something.
Mhm.
So with Saturn being back there and this lunar eclipse in Pisces, this is like ending something in your Pisces house.
And it's time to just, I think with eclipses, go with the flow. Eclipses speed up timelines. They help you make the decisions. They kind of like force your hand to do the things you've been avoiding. And so it's like, this is time to hop on your surfboard and just like ride out the waves of fate.
Yes. I love that. On September 21st, because now we are in eclipse season, there will be a partial solar eclipse at 29 Virgo. So 29 is the anaretic degree. And the ruler will be Mercury in Libra, opposite Neptune in Aries.
Confusing.
Mm-hmm.
And Mars will also be in Libra at 29 degrees. So we have two main focal points at that anaretic degree. For anyone who doesn't know what an anaretic degree is, it's like the final degree before a planet changes signs, and it just adds a lot of emphasis. And it can
Yeah.
be really intense, and it can be really exhausted, and it can go back and forth. Um, but it really kicks up the energy. And so there could be heightened anxiety definitely on this day, especially with the moon in Virgo. Let me tell you from personal
I
experience.
know, I was going to say
Some heightened anxiety. All right.
spiraling.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not because of you personally, but every Virgo I know just like spirals.
Yes. Yes. It's what we do. It's what we do. And at 29 degrees, I mean, that's definitely,
Mhm.
and the solar eclipse itself is opposite Saturn by degree. Saturn will be at 28 degrees of Pisces.
Ooh, yeah.
Oh,
Oh,
not super cute. Not super
it feels
cute.
very chaotic too. Mutable signs, you know? You're like, I
Uh-huh.
don't know what I'm doing. I'm confused.
Yes. But there
And
is
it's
some sort of ending. It's a full
yeah,
moon moment for your Saturn journey as well. So,
yes.
like when the sun met with Saturn back in, we didn't cover this, but back in February, the sun and Saturn are going to form a conjunction, or it might be early March. But this marks like a turning point in
Mhm.
that storyline as well.
And
And
it's
it's
a
loud.
south node eclipse. So it is a releasing point. It is
Mhm.
like a purging of some kind. And you have to purge to make way for the new.
Yeah.
It's just life.
Hmm.
So, okay, now we're moving into October. On the 13th, Pluto will station direct at 1 Aquarius. All right,
Cute.
moving forward. And so Pluto is going to be in Aquarius. It's there forever now for 20 years. Like
Mhm.
it's not going to go back into Capricorn. It's done. Um, October 22nd, Neptune retrograde will go back into Pisces.
Oof.
So it's moving back into Pisces. So it's like, I'm not done here yet. I am not done with the illusions and delusions of your Pisces house.
Yes. And Neptune's, I mean, so Neptune is a modern planet. So
Mm-hmm.
um its modern ruler or it's dignified in Pisces, right? That's like its natural
Mm-hmm.
sign is what modern astrologers say.
Yeah.
So it kind of gets a little extra bump here, a little help.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but there's some sort of storyline that needs to continue.
Mm-hmm. A lot of astrologers experience or they say that Neptune is a malefic.
Mm.
And it's because it gives this like fogginess, it lends to this like illusion. But like I said, Neptune is our ideals, like our belief systems and like what we believe in. And so you know, you might have to rethink some of your beliefs and like and because maybe when it goes into Aries, it's like you're going to have a reality check of like certain things you believed in are just not true. And I also think Neptune moving into Aries, there's going to be this like crisis of who you follow, like the
Mhm.
leaders and like false prophets, also
Mm.
with Saturn being there. It's like all these people that you looked up to, they are corrupt themselves or they're just human
Mm-hmm.
themselves. So
Mm-hmm.
Neptune in Pisces is very like rose colored glasses and like believing in things that maybe aren't real.
Yep, for sure.
Yeah. Okay, so November. So October is kind of like the post eclipse season to like get back on solid ground. November 7th, Uranus will ingress back into Taurus. So again, Uranus is not done with your Taurus house. I'm just
I
like laughing.
I like it. I like this.
You like this? Okay.
Give us a break from the Civil War.
Okay.
Oh, just kidding. I hope. I hope I'm just kidding.
Okay. It's okay, but like if it is, then if it is that, let's just hope that we're fighting for something worth fighting for.
Yes, of course. Of
Yes, of
course.
course. So yeah, Uranus, and by this point, Saturn, Neptune, and Uranus will be back in the signs that they were at the beginning of the year. So it's
Mhm.
almost like they gave you a preview, but it's like, oh, but we're not done yet here.
Yeah. Yeah, this is really the grand finale,
Mm-hmm. On November 9th, Mercury will station retrograde at 6 Sagittarius.
which is the same exact degree that last year's retrograde ended on December 15th, 2024. So it's bringing you back to that day, that full moon in Gemini.
Mhm.
And there's one more saga or storyline that needs to
Yeah.
take place.
Which is why I said, isn't the astrology of like this time so similar to now, like December of 2024? It's like
Hmm.
eerily similar. It's
Yeah.
like, are we
Well,
moving back or are we moving forward?
and when you think about it, um, November 11th, Jupiter stations retrograde at 25 degrees Cancer. And we had Mars in Cancer. At this point, it was in Leo,
That's
but
true.
around this time, we also had Mars. We had a serious Cancer transit.
That is very true.
Hmm.
Um, and so going to that November 11th, Jupiter will station retrograde at 25 Cancer. So, like I mentioned, whatever havoc Mars is doing into your Cancer house, Jupiter is like, okay, let's grow something, let's heal something, let's repair something. But now it's going to go retrograde. And I love what you always say about retrograde, Stephanie. You'd say like it's anti-capitalist because we're not always meant to like grow and keep going.
Hmm. I know. It's like an active. I literally just reminded myself that this morning. I was like sitting on the couch and I was beating myself up for like not doing
Mm-hmm.
anything, quote unquote. I'm like, no, there's so much going on in the world. Just be, just feel, just exist.
Yeah. You know what? One of my students told me, she's a Capricorn, so wise beyond her years. She said, if you are not allowing yourself to rest, then you won't have the rebirth that you can have. And I was just like, I
Yes.
was like, damn,
That's the sea goat wisdom.
that's the sea goat wisdom. And I think about that all the time. I'm like, how many rebirths have I missed out on because I didn't give myself that
Hmm.
time to just rest?
Hmm.
Um, okay, so November 27th, which is always around US genocidal Thanksgiving,
Hmm.
Saturn will station direct at 25 Pisces. So yeah, it's not moving forward now.
Hmm.
And then 2 days later, Mercury will station direct at 20 Scorpio.
Oh, okay.
Interesting.
And this is going to kick off the start of Mercury retrogrades taking place in water signs. I
Mm-hmm.
think for the next like year and a half. For the past year and a half, we've had them in fire signs, but now in 2026, we're going to start having them
Mm-hmm.
in Scorpio, Pisces, and Cancer. So buckle up, water signs.
Yeah, and it's the ruler of the South Node, Virgo.
Aha.
So you want to pay attention to that. And also the mutable rising signs, Mercury rules your two angular houses and Jupiter rules your two other angular houses. So pay attention to that as well.
Hmm.
Okay, December. The only thing happening really in December is that Neptune stations direct at 29 Pisces,
Ooh, anaretic degree.
anaretic degree. And yeah, by 2026, all of those planets move into their new signs. So it's like 2025, you get a preview of that story.
Yeah. This is a major year. There's so much to unpack, and we would be honored to continue unpacking it in more detail month by month with you all. So continue to tune into our podcasts, and you can support us in various ways if you enjoy our work. And yeah, Laura, do you have anything that you want to share or coming up? How can
I
people
think
support you and pay attention and
I think the easiest way to support both of us, because we do this for free 99, because we believe that astrology should be a tool for everybody and that education, there shouldn't be a paywall behind education. So the easiest way to support us is to follow us on all our channels, subscribe, like, share, and review, because that's how our stuff gets boosted in the algorithm. And yeah, like we mentioned, we do this every month, going day by day through the transits. And I don't have anything planned right now, but when I do, you could find out about that through my newsletter or just, again, like following on the channels. And that's like the easiest and low hanging fruit way to support us, right?
absolutely.
Yeah. But yeah, we love this. Like this is our destiny. This is our soul's purpose. So we love also doing it together.
Monthly highlight.
Monthly highlight. So we want to do it further. But also we're calling in being supported in doing this financially.
Yes, please. Saturn in my eighth house.
So
But
thank you so much for being a partner in this, Stephanie. Like it's honestly, again, we started this in what, 2022, right?
yeah, yeah.
It was Sagittarius season in 2022, and it's always like so fun to commiserate on the forecast
It's
together.
such a highlight. Yeah. Um, but thank you all for being here with us, and we will see you next month.
Bye.
Bye.